Hi there, this is Michael Westra with Breaking the Systems of Control podcast. Come hang out with me as we explore and pursue true freedom, liberty, and the art of minding your own business.
Welcome back, everyone, to episode 11 of Breaking the Systems of Control podcast. So I've been doing a ton of interviews, and I just want to let everybody know who's gotten an interview with me that they will be released. I just have to go through editing all of them, and I did multiple interviews in a row. So just stay patient with me. I will get them out as soon as possible. I've been dealing with a lot of personal stuff going on with the family, with the new baby coming, and a possible new job that I'm going to be starting. So I'm going to get to it when I can. But today we have an interview with Owen, and I forgot to ask him if I could use his last name, so I'm just not going to use his last name. But Owen was someone who was a fill-in for an interview that had a time mix-up with the schedule, and they weren't on the podcast in time. So I reached out to one of the groups I'm in on MeWe, and Owen was the first to respond. Ended up being an awesome interview. He is a homesteader that lives in Canada. He does permaculture. He's a blacksmith, a plumber, an entrepreneur. I think you're really going to like this guy. But before we get started, let's start off with the social media cringe of the week. So this social media cringe of the week is actually an encounter that I came across on the Nextdoor app. If anyone doesn't know what the Nextdoor app is, it's just essentially a social media for your local neighborhood or community. Some people may have already seen me posting about this, so if you've already seen it, you're gonna hear it again. But so there was someone who they were posting about squirrels being a nuisance in the area and tearing up their lawns and gardens, and that people need to stop feeding the squirrels. And I just jokingly said, just give me a call, I eat them. And underneath that, some Karen commented, that's illegal. And I said, no, actually it's not. It's a common small game. All you need is a tag to hunt squirrel. And she said, how about I get a tag for you? What a psycho. Anyway, oh gosh. Some people, I can't even deal with these people. And she, you know, what it is, she's probably one of those lonely old women who feed all the squirrels. They come up to their door, and yeah, so these squirrels are like her pet, so she can't imagine someone killing one of her precious squirrels. Anyway, let's get into the interview. Owen, welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
All right, so the listeners who don't really know what's going on here, I was supposed to have Josh Reynolds on, and he kind of flaked out, but he may be coming on later because there's kind of a time mix-up. So I took a shot in the dark, threw up on the Barter and Cryptocurrency Trade group to anyone who wanted to come on the podcast, and that's where Owen responded, and he was the first to respond, and we kind of chatted a little bit, and he ended up being a perfect candidate. So, Owen,
well, let's wait till the end before we say perfect.
Well, some of the things that you do definitely interest me and are a good fit for the podcast, I should say. Awesome. But with all that said, what do you do? This is the third time you're repeating this, but who are you? What do you do? And we will go from there.
Yeah, no problem. I live in Eastern Canada, and grew up in the country on a hobby farm. I kind of continued that as I got older, to doing kind of a little more heavily the homesteading thing. I got into the trades in my late teens, doing blacksmithing, and then in my early 20s, doing plumbing. So I've pretty much been doing that for 20 years. Done a little carpentry, a little bit of all kinds of stuff.
Awesome.
Yeah, and so kind of a jack of all trades. When you grow up in the country, I guess that's a big part of the lifestyle, because you maybe don't have a lot of money, or you're just kind of inspired to say, hey, I'm just gonna do that myself instead of hiring someone to do it. And
as Jack Spirko says, a polymath.
Yeah, exactly. So I got into we kind of been doing that. My wife grew up on a farm, like an actual like real farm, full-time farmers. And so we both have that background and interest in homesteading, and that has led us to sort of an independent mindset and about how we live our lives. I can't tell you exactly when I started listening to Jack, but like I said, it was 7-8 years ago, I think. And the ideas he talked about really shaped a lot of kind of how I think about the world and how I examine the world, and how I started just critically thinking myself, even though I was homeschooled. I didn't go to like a government school, so I already had sort of a critical thinking mind anyway.
Yep.
Already independent from the system, which I think helps. But really, I don't know what else to say.
Well, that's awesome.
Come to this point, and I've continued to, as we see, the U.S. of course, lots of turmoil in the last couple of years, and Canada is further down that road, I think, than the U.S. is, but still in a, it's things are pretty bad here, and that's really just cemented my resolve to distance myself and live as independent from the system, knowing that the system really wants to rope me in.
Right. Yeah. I kind of, with my background, I was raised a little more dependent on the system. And I mean, my father, he was still someone who was into, like, he was an outdoorsman, so hunting and fishing and stuff. But I went to public schools. We were raised in a Christian church, but other than that, we were, my father, he worked for a union with Ford Motor Company. And so I was kind of raised reliant on all these systems around me, but I kind of took my own path later on, especially after a lot of the stuff in Michigan started happening. I live in Michigan in the United States. I don't know if you have heard of any of the things going on in Michigan particular, but
it's just general things, not a lot of specifics, but just, when it comes to the U.S., like Canada and the U.S. are so close and connected in so many ways. And anything, you've probably heard the term, the example, but it's like sleeping beside an elephant. Every little twitch and move, and we feel it.
Right. So I'm sure you've been paying attention to all the craziness going on in the United States.
I try not to listen to too much, or it gets me a little wound up. So
Yep, and that's one thing I've been trying to stress with my listeners, is to just turn the crap off, because it just listening to the stuff actually directly impacts the way we live out our life and the choices we make, because like you said, it makes you kind of fired up and, walking around angry all the time. You're not making the right decisions. You're not thinking correctly. Yep. So it's good to just kind of turn that off. And what I like to say is to get out in nature and kind of clear your head. But, so you're currently a plumber. Are you, I don't know how all the licenses work in Canada. I'm sure they're similar. So, do you have like your journeymans? Are you a master plumber?
Yeah, so in Canada, the highest, there used to be multiple tiers like that, but before my time, they switched, and there's only apprentice and journeyman now. And
Okay.
as long as you can pass that journeyman's exam, you can work anywhere in Canada. So I have my journeyman's, and for quite a number of years, I ran my own contracting business. So I was
Oh, that's
self-employed for quite a while. Yep.
So are
Now I
you
work.
working?
Well,
Go
right
ahead.
now I'm working at a industrial. I'll call it an industrial sized greenhouse locally here as on maintenance. I went and taught for a few years at the community college, taught plumbing, and then left that and went back to working as plumbing. But of course, my business I'd kind of let go while I was teaching, which I loved. But just the way things worked here, like they were cutting back on courses and staff and all that, and I was low guy on the totem pole, so that didn't work out long term. But I learned a lot doing this greenhouse thing, and it's a great resource for a homesteader to work at a very large greenhouse.
I was going to say that's pretty awesome the way that worked out. I actually worked in as an apprentice in plumbing for, I don't know, it was only a few months, but I do a lot of my own plumbing on my home, but I ended up getting into CNC machining.
Nice.
Just life took me in a different route. At the time, immediately I needed to be making more money because of some financial burdens. So in the long run, plumbing probably would have been a better trade, but the CNC machining was more money to start off. So.
Well, it's funny you say that because I'm currently teaching myself CNC machining.
Are you?
Over the holidays, I built myself a CNC router.
Oh, wow. That's awesome.
And so, because I've been doing the 3D printing thing for a couple of years and messing around with Fusion 360 and, just doing basic stuff, but I love the designing side of it. And I just decided, you know what? There's stuff you can't do with a 3D printer. Especially in like wood.
Yeah.
You can't carve stuff and you can't make mechanical parts out of metal. So I found the MP CNC, which is like a mostly printed CNC. And over the holidays, I had some money saved up and I bought all the parts from the company and built it over the holidays. And I've been messing around with it ever since. I'm trying to learn to do aluminum, like to machine aluminum. And man, that's a little bit trickier than wood. So I'm definitely in a learning process.
Once you learn how to deal with different metals, aluminum is actually quite easy compared to the others, but it's just that learning curve to initially learn to work with metals. So,
yeah.
But with your 3D printing, I really don't know much about 3D printers. So when you are deciding you want to make whatever you want to print out of it, are you writing a program yourself, or is there some kind of website or something you go on that you can find some kind of programs to install and then you run it from there? How does that work?
So with 3D printing, the easiest way is to find something already designed that the code has already been written for. So you go on a website like Thingiverse, which has thousands, maybe tens of thousands of user-created items that they've uploaded for free. People can download them for free. Usually they have some sort of commercial use limitation, but for personal use, you can download them, and then it's all there. You just stick it in your printer, and off it goes. For the stuff I create, I use Fusion 360, and I do the design, and then I export it as an STL file, put it into which is the normal, actually I should back up a bit. That's the normal format that you would download something into. And then you put it in a program that has all your printing parameters, as options. So you can set your temperatures, you can set your your wall thickness and your layer thickness and the infill amount and just everything. And
Wow.
then you hit slice, and then it generates all your G code to a file, and you just take that. Some people hook it up to their computers. I just put an SD card and plug the SD card into my printer, click print, and off it goes.
Wow, that's awesome. Yeah, I've been wanting to get into 3D printing for a little while now. I just don't have it's just not a smart purchase for me right now. I know they're not the most expensive things, but how I am, if I'm getting into something, I like to jump in with something that's not low end, but not high end. So just kind of middle of the ground quality, because the way my brain works, once I start getting into some sort of new project, I go down this rabbit hole, and I'm just nonstop doing it. I'm constantly learning. And before you know it, I'm already wanting to upgrade because my knowledge has taken me past that lower quality item anyway. So
you sound like me. I'm the same way.
So it's kind of, I don't know if it's legitimately me needing something. It might just be an excuse I make for myself to buy something better. I don't know. Or to my wife, I should say.
Yeah.
So when you're doing you said CNC machining, you said you're milling with a router. Is that you're doing?
Yeah. So, well, I mean, I just built this over the Christmas break, so I'm really, really new to it, and I've just mostly been doing engraving with a V router bit in like pine boards to make, signs and things like that, just to help learn the setup and learn the CAM portion of Fusion.
Okay.
Because it has its own built-in CAM, programming and post-processing.
When you say you built it, did you buy some sort of kit? Did you follow some kind of plan or design, some kind of blueprint? How did that work out?
Yeah, so I went to, I'll throw their name out there. I'm sure they don't mind. V1 Engineering.
Okay.
And they sell you can use all their ideas, but they do sell all the parts, including the printed parts. And having the printers, I was able to save myself a fair bit of money. I think probably $170 I was able to save on this thing by printing my own. But they do sell a kit as well, which you can add to, subtract to. Like, you can do all these different options, and it has everything except your printed parts and your rails. Because you're
okay. So I'm kind of picturing it now. So essentially, it's kind of like a router that's sitting on like a track almost. And then
it's mounted, and then it's all belt driven on steel pipe.
Awesome.
So all these polar bearings I mean, they have their limitations. You're not gonna start ripping through a bunch of steel and aluminum at really heavy cuts. But I have seen people do steel on them when they really get them dialed in, and I have seen people do some pretty amazing things with aluminum once they get it dialed in and know how to get all those settings just exactly right to work with, the capabilities of the machine.
Right. Yeah, I would love to build something like that. I'm kind of spoiled because the shop I work in, we have $500,000 mills that we're working with, and $300,000 lathes, and so we have like the big high tech stuff. And essentially, all I'm doing is we have a guy who writes all the programs, and I will have to go through and kind of make an adjustment where I see any issues, because sometimes he'll miss it. Humans make mistakes, and then I'll go in and set all my tooling on the. I work on lathes, so I'll set all my tooling on the turrets, touch them off, and let her rip. I mean, it's a little more complicated than that, but that's essentially all I'm doing.
Yeah. Well, I have I have a metalworking background, being a blacksmith, mind you. They were the the old school machinists.
Yeah.
But
so what kind of things did you make with when you were blacksmithing?
Really anything and everything. Mostly like it was decorative stuff. I didn't shoe horses and do that, but I do all decorative stuff. So anything from hooks to railings to knives. Knives are probably not my area of expertise, but something I've been teaching myself over the last few years to get better at.
Do you use those knife kits that Jack always talks about?
No, I don't. I do all my own
from
scratch. But if you wanted exotic woods, that would probably be a good place to get them.
Yeah, I've thought about getting into knife making as well, but it just seems like I have such a long list of different things that I'm doing and want to get into, and I need to slow it down, focus on one thing at a time. Recently, I haven't actually started it yet, but I'm in the process of building a hydroponic drip system.
Nice.
And I've never done hydroponics before, so this is going to be kind of new to me.
Yeah, I've never done hydroponics strictly, but I've done aquaponics. So sort of similar concepts.
Yeah, and if you're doing aquaponics, I'm pretty certain that you'd be able to do hydroponics. Because if I'm not mistaken, aquaponics takes a lot more dialing in your levels, your pH levels, and your nutrient levels and stuff, because you got to keep your fish alive and you got to keep your plants alive. So
that's right. You're trying to find that balance of what's good for fish, what's good for plants, because they don't like exactly the same pH, especially. You've got to find that and keep that middle ground. But also your fish don't provide all the nutrients that plants need. So you're still having to add additives that don't kill your fish, but will keep your plants alive. So yeah, we run seasonally up here because we just can't keep a system going in the wintertime. It's just simply too cold. But still, even in a full one season, I go, wow, if I was running this nonstop, I'd really have to have it dialed in to keep it balanced and not going off the rails.
Right. Yeah, I was about to ask how you do that with the cold that you get in the wintertime. I mean, I'm in Michigan, so we get a lot of snow and a lot of ice and stuff. I mean,
pretty fairly similar climate, I would think.
Yeah. I mean, like, for example, this winter has actually been unusually warm, but like last year we had days where it was, negative 30 degrees Fahrenheit. So with wind chill, that is. But yeah, it gets pretty cold here. So you don't keep your aquaponics going through the winter?
No, we don't. We start. I have a greenhouse, so we start it as early in the spring as possible. Once those temperatures, aren't getting lower than 1 or 2 degrees below freezing at night, then we'll fill the system with water and try to get something going, so that we have as long a season as possible, and we'll run it into October, November, if possible. But the greenhouse is what makes that possible.
So this, we're kind of talking about specifics right now, but I want to go back and talk about you with homesteading. So when did you kind of get into homesteading? When you say you're a homesteader, what does that mean to you? Are you producing most of your food? Are you only producing a small amount? So how much land do you own? I want to get into some of those specifics.
Sure. We have 40 acres. Part of the original homestead that would have been deeded out by the British government into this, this plot of land. There was actually 2 plots that were combined eventually, but my dad bought it back in the early 80s, and I have, 40 acres of that. And so to tell you when we got into it, I couldn't even tell you, because as I said, like, we grew up doing hobby farming. My wife grew up on a farm, And so it was like just like that's your lifestyle.
So
and
when
so
you
it's,
say hobby farming, can you kind of
sure.
reiterate what that means?
Yeah, so we had chickens off and on. We'd have a milk cow. We'd have pigs, things like that. Have a garden. There was an old apple orchard on the property already that my parents would have utilized, and it was like they would put food away, but it wasn't. They didn't live off of it in that sense. So a hobby farm means you kind of do it, but you don't really depend on it for an income or for all of your sustenance. My wife and I, on the other hand, take a fair bit more serious approach to it. We would probably grow 80% or more of our yearly food requirement for our family of now 7.
Wow. Wow, that's awesome. So what kind of livestock do you have? What kind of things do you grow? What?
Yeah, so we've got, we have laying hens, and every year we grow about 150 meat birds. This past year we had 2 pigs. Some years we have 1, some years we have more, some years we have none. Just depends on the scenario. Like I say, my in-laws have a beef farm, so we get our beef from them. So there's not really much incentive for us to grow our own beef. The milk we get from them as well, but we probably will be getting a milk cow in the next year or 2. Just with young kids, it's quite a challenge. Really ties you down when you've got to milk twice a day. But that's
right. I was going to say it's a lot of work.
You're right. So we've got plant. We about 10 years ago, a little better than that now, actually. Man, time flies. We planted some apple trees and pear trees, and then I started doing when I got into permaculture a few years back, 5-6 years ago now. I started a sort of food forest on my property on swales.
Okay.
And so I've been working on, we planted trees in that, and we just every year we try to add a few more of this and a few more of that, mostly around fruit and perennial plants. We have a greenhouse, 20 by 54 foot greenhouse, I guess it is, and probably about 5,000 square feet of annual vegetable garden.
Wow, that's awesome. That's my dream right there. That's where I'm trying to work towards. I don't have the land right now. I do have an acre, so I'm able to. I mean, you'd be surprised at how much you can actually do on an acre.
Oh, listen, all of that stuff that we have is on probably less than an acre and a half.
Wow, that is awesome.
We have, like, I tell people we have 40 acres, and they're like, "Oh, that would be so nice." And I'm thinking, I don't use 98% of it.
Wow, yeah, and that's what I was about to ask you is how much of the property you actually use, because a big thing that my listeners have been coming back with is, well, we only live on a quarter of an acre, a third of an acre, whatever, so we can't really do anything. It's like, you'd be surprised the kind of things that you can actually do if you really wanted to. You could grow a lot. I mean, there was trying to think of that. There was a guy who owned, like, I think a quarter of an acre, and he just he was growing. I'm trying to think of how much he was producing, but he was able to make like $150,000 income just from selling produce.
Wasn't that a tenth of an acre, or was that a quarter of an acre?
Oh, it might have been. Yeah.
I know who you're talking. He lives in Canada. Doesn't he live in Alberta?
Yeah. Yeah.
I was literally just going to mention him.
It's incredible.
He's on YouTube. Yeah, incredible.
Yeah, I'm going to try to find his page after this, and I'll link it in the show notes for our listeners. But that's a big thing I try to stress, is that you don't need a ton of room. You just need to start doing it. And
exactly,
if you start making excuses early on, you'll never end up doing it.
Exactly. Around here, I don't know what it's like where you are, but around here, if you were outside of a town municipality limits, the smallest piece of land that you can build a house on is 1 acre.
Really?
Yeah. And people are like, oh, I only have an acre. It's not enough. And I said, you can grow all you need for a year for your family on an acre, certainly for vegetables. Now, you're not going to have a cow and pigs and chickens, and all of those things.
No, but you could easily have your poultry, and you can have, you can definitely grow a lot. So
yeah, exactly. The other thing we do, obviously, we don't produce. The one thing we don't produce a lot of is a lot of our fruit, but we will buy that sort of bulk in season. So when it's strawberry season, we are in the strawberry fields. My wife and daughters, they are like 2 weeks, 3 weeks. It is nonstop strawberries, and they'll buy, they'll pick 150 flats of strawberries or whatever, and put it in the freezer and make jam. And like our summer is just absolutely nuts putting stuff away.
Yeah, I've been considering doing that kind of a forest system that you were talking about in the back of my lot, because it's already kind of overgrown back there, and there's a few mulberry trees, and I want to throw up possibly a few fruit trees to get that going, and maybe put some vining varieties there, some ground coverage, and
I've seen some really cool designs where they're based around one tree. Like you don't have to have this. You don't have the room to have a whole bunch of big trees with all the different layers in a food forest. You can do a sort of a guild type of setup with one tree as your centerpiece, and everything else kind of works its way out from that.
Yeah, I mean, they would just obviously have to make sure their tree is self-pollinating. Otherwise,
yes, that's true. Depending on what you've got, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Wow, that's awesome. So you said you do aquaponics. Are you considering doing hydroponics?
I am actually. Just one of the things that we lack in the wintertime, and our dependence in the wintertime is for greens, for lettuce and spinach and stuff. Like, there's just no way to store that. Like, how do you store lettuce and spinach and have a salad in February? And so we're really dependent on grocery stores for that sort of food. And so for a few years, I did run a aquaponics system inside, like a mini one, but it just didn't work well, just the way our house is laid out and things like that. So I think a hydroponic system would work much better inside. You eliminate the need for filters and all that stuff for the fish waste. And you can just, I think that would work more sustainably inside, even though it would cost, you're going to be a little dependent on your fertilizers, and things like that.
Yeah.
But I think that would work better for kind of providing a lot of our own greens in the wintertime.
Yeah, I haven't really decided how I'm going to set mine up yet. I'm thinking I've been doing a lot of research, but everybody does it differently. So I'm thinking I'm just going to screw around and figure out what works for me. I'm kind of thinking I'm going to have a tub. I'm going to have like a rack system with a tub on bottom that has all the nutrient in it, and then a pump that comes up to another small tub, and I'll have holes cut out on the top of the lid of the tub, and I'm going to run little what are they, like the little sprinklers throughout the tub, and I'm going to have a drain that comes out, so then after it waters the plants, it'll drain right out into one of my utility sinks. So then it'll just kind of self-regulate itself, besides me having to fill up the water underneath. But
So it
yeah,
doesn't circulate back. It doesn't circulate that water back through again.
no. And the reason why I'm not doing that is because I've talked to many people who have been doing hydroponics for a while, and they strongly suggested that I don't do a recirculating system because it's a lot more finicky and it takes a lot more knowledge. And they said if you're going to get into it, just make sure it drains out. And once I kind of get the feel for everything, I might try to design a recirculating system, but apparently it's just hard to make sure all your levels are perfect when you do that. But if you are someone who has experience doing that with aquaponics, I'm sure that wouldn't be an issue for you, but I've never done either. So.
Right. Well, one of the challenges I have here is water. There's a lot of water around. I mean, it's Eastern New Brunswick. We have tons of water, but I don't have a great deal of flow. So I have a high water table with very low recovery. So for our house, we have a 215-foot well that I can run dry in like an hour, less than that, 30 minutes. So in the winter or in the summer, when it's hot and dry, we barely have enough to keep our house going.
Wow.
So that's for
tough.
me. Whenever I hear, oh, we're going to just dump this water and not reuse it, I go, oh, we got to find a way to save that water and conserve and reuse that water as many times as possible.
Yeah, I get city water, so
yeah,
I don't have much of an issue. I still do collect rainwater, but obviously that's kind of a no-go right now in the wintertime.
yeah, exactly.
Unless you have some kind of heaters, and at that point, it's kind of pointless to even do it because the cost to just collect rainwater would be ridiculous.
Yeah.
All right, man. Well, I'm not going to hold you up too much longer. We went for what? Probably a good 30 minutes once we started recording, but I would definitely like to possibly get you back on and talk a little more about different things you're doing, stuff you're up to in the future if you're interested.
Yeah, anytime. I won't say I have a history in podcasting, but I've done a fair bit of podcasting in the past. I was the host of what's now probably the largest pro gun podcast in Canada.
Oh wow, which one's that?
It's called Slamfire Radio.
Okay.
We started it back, I don't know when it was, like 2013, I want to say. 14 maybe. 14 maybe. Anyway, so I host on that for quite a long time, and I've done shows with the shoot, the name just flew away. Don't you just love that?
Oh yeah.
A number of different podcasts. They'll have me on to talk about blacksmithing or homesteading or whatever. So yeah, I'm very comfortable talking to people about all that kind of stuff.
Well, that's awesome, and I'm sure you can kind of tell that I'm a little newer to this. I have this will actually be my fourth interview, so I'm still kind of getting the hang of things. I'm someone who's comfortable speaking in front of people, and I used to wait tables for a long time, so I'm good with interacting with people. So it takes time. It's a matter of time kind of getting a hold of a rhythm and stuff. But
yeah, well, to do it, I mean, I did my own podcast for 20-ish episodes, and it was just me. I did a few interviews, but I found it was a real struggle to monologue like that.
Yeah, and that's what I found out pretty quick. I can talk about topics for a long time, but you still have to do a lot of planning, and so it's kind of hard to push out that content, especially most of my episodes are like an hour long. So once I started interviewing people, I'm like, wow, this is like so much easier. So let me just start booking a bunch of interviews. So I had like 4 interviews booked in a matter of a week. So
well, what we did with our Slamfire Radio pod, there was 3 of us that did it. And so you have that banter and that conversational type show, and we did it as entertainment. Like, there was information in there, and there was a really good community that was built out of it. And even when I left, and some other, the original hosts, were not as actively involved with the show anymore. They have replacement hosts now that have really taken it on. It's a huge community, but we found that the entertainment value was a big part of what made it popular. People wanted to listen, not just because it was about guns and it was their hobby and there was information, but because it was fun to listen to, because we gave each other a hard time and we ribbed each other and made fun of each other, and we were just bros, right?
Yeah, there's many podcasts that I listen to like that.
Yeah, and so that's, when you have those other hosts or even a guest that you can go back and forth with, that makes a big difference as far as the ease of making the show.
Right, and that's why the interviews that I do, I try to not make it so robotic where I just have like a list of questions and I'm just shooting them off. I kind of like, I do have like a list of questions just in case I kind of go off, but I like to just let the conversation take itself. So
yeah, go where it's going to be interesting.
But yeah, I'm a firearms enthusiast myself. I've been shooting firearms since I was like, I don't know, maybe 8 years old. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to get a 3D printer, is so I can build some of my accessories for my AR-15 and stuff. So yeah, so we'll definitely have to stay in contact. How long have you been on that Barter and cryptocurrency page?
Oh dear, that's a question I can't answer. It hasn't been a ton of time. I want to say a month and a half, maybe.
Have you?
It's not been very long.
Purchased from anyone or sold anything?
Haven't done any of that yet. I've been trying to come up with something that I could sell on there, but being in Canada, and I think most of the other people on there in the States, it's a little bit tricky. People generally don't want to pay that international shipping.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, unfortunately. All right, man. Well, I'm glad I had you on. Thanks for filling in.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This was fun.
But we'll stay in contact on MeWe, and yeah, man, I'm glad you came on.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, you have a good night.
Yeah, you too.
All right, well, I hope you enjoyed that last-minute interview. If you'd like to stay up to date with news about the podcast, you can go to www.breakingthesystems.com, scroll to the bottom of the page, and sign up for that email list. One thing I mentioned in the previous episodes is that I now have a Telegram channel, and I actually prefer this Telegram channel over the email list, and eventually I think I'm going to move away from that email list, but we need everybody to transfer over there first. You can also stay in contact with me and see what I've been up to by following me on MeWe and Flote. Yep, I am not going to be mentioning the mainstream platforms anymore. This podcast is also on Bitchute and Odysee. Yep, that means not the platform that starts with a Y. That's all I have for you today. So I hope everybody enjoys the rest of your week. See you next time.